Hey, entrepreneurs, what's your opinion? Who would win if we had two entrepreneurs with equal skill? One of them focused on working long hours and trying to get more out of themselves during every hour they worked. And the other entrepreneur focused more on controlling their attention, making sure that they worked on the right things. Across 6 months, if they're trying to achieve the same business goal, who would you bet on? I place my bet on the person who's focused on doing the right things, the attention control. Why? Well, because what tends to happen is, despite your best effort to accomplish more when you're rushing and trying to get things done, we tend to wander off course. It's kind of like shooting arrows as fast as you can instead of getting really clear about, well, where's the target, and spending your time slowing down to focus on that one bullseye. And so you can accomplish a lot more if you slow down to really define what the problem is and focus your mind on the smallest, the fewest number of steps to get there. It's kind of like that Tim Ferriss quote that being busy is a form of laziness. Being busy and rushing is not what's going to accomplish your outcome the fastest. Focusing on the right things is, and this is partly just because the way that the human mind is wired. So my challenge for you this week has to do with taking just one small step toward creating a system that funnels your attention in the right ways. And so what we're doing is we're taking into account the fact that our human mind tends to wander off course. You can have a goal and know where you're trying to get to, but often entrepreneurs have this frustrating experience of getting to the end of a work week and they know they work their tails off, but they can't really tell you what they spent all that time and energy and effort on. And that's because they're wandering from one thing to the next. Essentially, they're operating with the opposite of the Eisenhower matrix. They're just focused on whatever seems to be most urgent at the moment. And so the needle moving long-term goals that they really care about rarely gets enough of their attention. So that's why part of my process of coaching entrepreneurs is going back to the basics, something that is tried and true, something that's proven to work to get us to accomplish stuff faster, is to simply take your big goal and break it down into a cascading set of smaller and smaller pieces, and to then have some of those pieces find their way onto your calendar. So that's just one strategy. There's many different ways to direct your attention to the right things. Time boxing is one of them that's proven to work really well. And of course, one of the simplest forms of time boxing is to take your needle moving long-term project, the thing that you feel like would make the biggest difference across the course of this year, and just say, I'm going to start with 1 hour, 2 if you can get away with it. An hour, 90 minutes, just at the beginning of your day, before you even open your inbox, before you open Slack to see what team members have pinged you about things. Now, some of the entrepreneurs I work with say, Todd, I can't do that because I've got this team that's overseas and they're working at night. I get there and they're all waiting on me to answer questions. There's always reasons why these kinds of things can be difficult. But what we need to do is just remember that overall concept is just we're trying to build filters. You don't have to use the first thing in the morning you start with your highest priority strategy. That's just a strategy. The concept, the overall principle is what we're trying to apply. So you've got to make it fit for you and your business in a way that you're going to say at the end of a week, wow, that genuinely was better. I accomplished more. I feel better about what I accomplished, and I spent more of my time on the things that matter most. Now, here's the other problem that comes up with this. When I ask entrepreneurs to create these kinds of filters, they'll often start off and they'll work on it. They'll make some progress with it. They'll thank me. They'll say, this is so great, I'm doing well. And then some time passes and I check in with them and they say, yeah, I stopped doing that. And when we dig in and ask why, it's usually because they were operating at 100% capacity and then something went wrong. They either got sick or an employee quit, or there was a sudden surge in demand from customers or clients. And as a result, what gets cut is the stuff that feels less urgent. And so they cut the planning process beginning of the week. They cut out their 10 minutes of reviewing all of the tasks and sorting them and prioritizing them and time boxing a few of them. They just stopped doing that because there's this sense that if I just dive in and get stuff done, that will accomplish goals faster. And it's a very short-term, short-sighted way of approaching business. It'd be better if you said, my priorities will always be directed from a position of slowing down to think so that I can be more far-sighted. But we all know that what happens in real life is that sometimes there's emergencies, sometimes there's stuff that you didn't plan for. And that's why I'm going to tell you a second principle that allows entrepreneurs to have success with this. And it's a strange principle because it sounds counterintuitive. It sounds like the opposite of what should be true. And that is that if an entrepreneur works at 90% of his or her capacity, they will accomplish more than if they try to work at 100% of their capacity. It sounds backward, right? But here's the reason. if you're working at 90% of your capacity and then something goes wrong, your systems can still operate because you have a little bit of buffer. By creating some buffer, you can actually be more consistent because you follow your systems. Things that break can get fixed when you have a little buffer. But when you're at 100%, if something breaks, you tend to lose the progress you've made at creating these filters for your attention, and you just go back to scrambling again. And then let's say 3 weeks later, you realize like, oh, I've just been rushing from thing to thing. I need to sit down and plan. So you start planning, and then you get back into the planning process, and that works for 10 days, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then something goes wrong and you wander off again. And that's why a lot of you have had this experience of implementing. You read about somebody's to-do list system, or you get inspired by an entrepreneur that talks about how they plan on Sunday nights before they dive in or whatever. And you do that and it works for a while, and then you wander away from it. And then you come back and you wander away. That's because you're trying to operate at 100%. So here's the thing, you're going to feel less stressed and make more progress by not demanding as much from yourself or your team. If you constantly operate at the margins of your total capacity, your systems break. And those systems tend to be the things that allow you to work smart instead of fast. So here's your challenge for this week. Just think of all of the various things that you've already been exposed to about how to filter your attention towards the right things during the workday. Just choose one and just make it a simple thing. Just one area of your business where you can say, I'm going to take this one step to create a filter to make sure I guide my attention toward doing the right thing so I can work smarter, not harder. And let's see what happens. If you like the experiment after practicing with this for a week, you're probably going to need to say, all right, now I'm going to take the next step. I'm going to reduce the total demand of my time by 90%. Now, look, I know that that's kind of hard to measure. Like, what does that mean exactly? But you'll know it when I find that for the most part, when I ask an entrepreneur, like, are you operating at 100%? They usually say something like, probably more like 115%. And that's not going to work long-term, right? So we've got to pull back. You'll know when you get to that place where you say, yeah, I have a little bit of extra capacity where if I need to, I can kick into another gear, but I'm not there right now. I'm operating at kind of 90% of my true capacity. That will allow you to keep these systems working for the long term. So there's your challenge for the week. Slow down for just a minute to think about which filter you can put in place to direct your attention more automatically towards the right things so that you can work smarter instead of harder. See you next week.